Welcome to the latest webcast in Caring.com's Digital Marketing Academy. Our session today is focused on how to build a caregiver recruiting and hiring system to meet market demand for your services. I'm Denise Grob, a marketing director here at Caring.com, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Peter Droubay, who I'll introduce in more depth in just one moment. Before we dive into the presentation, though, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. This is a one-way webcast where only the presenters speak, but you can ask questions. We hope you will. You can enter them in the chat module, or you can enter them in the Q&A module. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. And one of the top questions we get with each session is, will we be providing the slides and recording? The answer is yes. Hopefully you see that this session is being recorded, and we will provide the slides. We'll send you all an email tomorrow morning, and we also will host it on the website partners.caring.com. Now, the sponsor of today's free webinar is Caring.com. For those of you who are getting to know us, and as a refresher for our partners, our organization was founded by caregivers for caregivers. Our flagship website, Caring.com, was created and launched in 2007 to equip family caregivers to make better decisions, save time and money, and feel less alone and less stressed in providing senior care to their loved ones. Today, millions of people come to our website, including seniors themselves, to research and get referred to senior living communities and home care agencies. In fact, we have one of the most comprehensive senior care directories on the web. We are the #1 source of senior living and senior care reviews online. We have about 265,000 consumer reviews published on the site right now, and we add thousands every month. A couple years ago, we were acquired by Caring Holdings LLC, a group of investors with over 15 years of digital marketing expertise. That transaction has enabled us to continue to grow and expand our services for both consumers and for those we serve in the business-to-business relationships, senior living communities, home care agencies, and more. Our featured presenter today is someone I'm so thrilled to work with at Caring.com, Peter Droubay. Some of you are very familiar with him, given his extensive experience in our industry and prior webinars he's done, which are quite popular, including the music. Thank you for the feedback on the music to those of you who chatted us. Peter has helped build both the Senior's Choice and Hallmark Home Care. He trained hundreds of home care franchises nationwide through those endeavors. And he was one of the original recruiters and trainers for Caring's team of family advisors who are making referrals to senior living communities and home care agencies. In fact, Peter is a renowned trainer in sales and marketing with a proven track record in multiple industries. He has a wealth of practical knowledge, which you'll see for yourself momentarily through this presentation. This is an overview of what Peter's going to share with you. He's going to start with some mindset shifts that are necessary in a tight hiring market. He's going to cover how to make your agency or senior living community the place to work, how to build your image for prospective caregivers and build a hiring system, where to find caregivers, also some weekly hiring days, and how to keep your current caregivers employed and happy with your businesses. So without further ado, Peter Droubay.
Well, thank you very much. And it is my pleasure to work with Denise. She is outstanding and just a joy to work with. And I've really enjoyed being able to partner with her on so many projects here at Caring.com. And I've enjoyed being with Caring.com. Again, my background is extensive in the industry. It always feels like an obituary when I get introduced. And like I like to tell people, a good resume simply means you're old. So I have been at this for a number of years, over 20, almost 22 years in the senior care industry. And by the way, with that, our topic today, we decided to do this topic even though we don't really have a dog in this fight, in the sense that we're not an employment agency. We don't sell, leads for caregivers looking for employment. We do get some inquiries, and we're looking into maybe how we could help with some of those inquiries and passing them on. But it's not our business to really talk about caregiver recruiting. But it is something that is a hot topic right now. You're all on this call because I'm sure that there's a need right now, and we see what's going on. And so I thought, the topic was raised, and we thought we'd share some of the history, some of the best practices, and some of my background in doing this. In 22 years, I've seen some really good markets, some really bad markets in terms of hiring. And so there's a cycle that we'll talk about, and we'll talk about what needs to be done when that cycle is going through a tough time like it is right now, as many people are struggling with that. Let me tell you what we're not going to talk about here. We're not going to complain about our current environment. What I've found, and it was my father, thank goodness for him, and bless him, he's no longer with us. But my father used to tell me all the time, you can either complain or you can make money. You can't do both, right? You can either succeed or complain, but they're mutually exclusive. So we're not going to spend any time today talking about our current environment or complaining about it. And we're certainly not going to talk about things we cannot directly control. So I'm not going to talk about fiscal policy and whatever else is going on out there, right? That's not our focus. And in any market, you have to work on what you can control, and you got to work on no complaints, right? Let's just move forward. Let's control what we can control. So with that, let's launch into it. And again, I'm going to go kind of fast. So we are recording it. You will get the slides afterwards, but feel free to take notes. You can also ask plenty of questions. I am going to do a Q&A session coming up. And so you can type in the Q&A panel or in the chat panel, either one, and we will select questions and answer, time with whatever time we have. And so I'm going to go kind of quickly and see what we can do here. Last point of sort of setting this all up is that I'm not coming to you with what is necessarily any magic bullets. What I am coming to you with is, more than 20 years of experience, very successful experience in hiring caregivers. And I'll share with you some best practices. Now, for some of you, they will be magic bullets because some of the stuff you've never heard before. But for some of you, a lot of what we're going to talk about is well known. It'll be just reminders about getting back to fundamentals, basics. If it's brand new to you, then it'll be stuff that you can apply, and it will be exciting for you to apply it and see it work. But I'm not necessarily coming with any brand new program or nothing to sell you here. We just want to talk about how to recruit caregivers in our current environment, how to move business forward that way, because there is a lot of concern and a lot of issues out there right now that's stymieing business a little bit. So let's talk about it. So the first thing is I want to draw an analogy, and it's an analogy that you all can, get on board with, meaning that we're going to talk about how it's a buyer's market, right? The analogy is we're going to use real estate. And the question is, what are we doing to compete within the market? So here's the analogy specifically. All of us understand enough about real estate, I think, that we've kind of understood the cycles of buyers and sellers markets in real estate, right? When it's a buyer's market, obviously it's tougher on the sellers, right? Buyer's market, there's the demand is lower, the inventory is higher, there's a long listing time and things like that. And so that doesn't mean you can't sell a property during a buyer's market. You just have to be better at it, right? There are still people selling lots of properties. You just have to be really good at it. In a seller's market, it's just the opposite, right? Where you don't have to do much and you can sell your property. Well, to make that analogy, those same cycles appear in any sort of hiring process, regardless, again, of any laying any blame or complaints anywhere. We see these cycles no matter what, right? I've been through several of these cycles now for various reasons that we can try and attach to it. But the bottom line is the cycle runs. There are caregiver markets is what I call them. And that's a market in which there's not as many caregivers available. And consequently, they can be picky about where they work. Wages are moving higher. Hiring requires more effort on our part. It doesn't mean you can't hire. And in fact, lots of people around the country are doing just fine, hiring and filling their open positions. On the other hand, it swings at times to an employer's market. And unfortunately, lots of people have gotten into the business when it was an employer's market. And that means there's lots of caregivers. We can, not that we intend to, but standards can be lowered, expectations can be lowered because it's really easy to hire. Wages are low, right? There's a plentiful supply. So it's just like the roller coaster that we go through in real estate with buyers and sellers market. We go through the same roller coaster ride with employment. Unfortunately, if we got in or if we got lazy during the employer's market when it was really easy to do business, it's easy to get caught off guard when suddenly that pool of labor shrinks and we don't have as many people available to us. And suddenly we've got to get back to really understanding that market and doing well in it. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to do well in the market. If things change, then obviously we've got, the benefit of things changing, but we don't know when or how. And so we've got to compete right now. Now, here's the positive. The positive, and believe it or not, it is a positive. I actually kind of like the cycles a bit in that whenever things go down, right? When people jump on board the roller coaster, right, when it's at the top and it's a lot of fun, right? It's great. They jump on board, but it's too easy. It's just, they're having fun and business is easy. All boats rise with the tide and everybody's doing well. And even if they're not the greatest business, whether it be brick and mortar senior care or an agency, if you're in home care, the bottom line is it's easy to jump on and ride the ride when it's at the top. But as things come down, a lot of people, as the ride slows down and it levels off, that's the time when a lot of competition jumps out of the market. Right? It's just not easy anymore. So I always kind of like the swings. And if there's a positive spin to put on it, during the low times, that's when you lose competitors. And if you do well during that market, that's when you add strength. The strong get stronger. So think about it this way. This is the chance to corner a lot more of the market if you can put in place systems, which we're going to talk about here, that still have good, caregivers coming in. You're maintaining your caregivers, you're hiring caregivers, you're still able to expand and grow. It's the time when a lot of your weaker competition gets out of the market. So all of you are on this call because you're stronger. You've sought out this opportunity to get more information. And so let's be the ones that win. Now, how do we do that? Well, there's some key mind shifts that I'm going to talk about. Denise talked about some of these a little bit, but I'm going to delve in deeper with each of them. The first mindset shift, and again, going back to the analogy of the home, right? If we're in a buyer's market and we're trying to market a house, what do we do first? Well, the first thing is we might need to rehab the house. We might need to make the house itself a better house so it competes better. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some ways that we might have gotten away from. Some of you probably have all this nailed, but we're going to talk about some ways of making your care home or your assisted living or your agency the premier place to work, right? It is, we've redone the foundation, we've repainted, we put on a new roof, right? We're making the home a better home to be. Now, by the way, the next step in that is if you're in a buyer's market, we need to also make sure that we're publicizing more. In a buyer's market in real estate, you've got to advertise more, you've got to get the word out more, you've got to get in front of more people. Well, same thing here. If we're in a caregiver market where the hiring is a little bit tougher, we've got to get the word out. So we're going to talk about some ways of doing that. Consumer and employment reviews critical, plus some other PR stuff that we'll talk about. Then we've got to get into an actual process where we're able to move people through the house in a buyer's market, or in this case, we're going to talk about systems. So we're going to talk about hiring as being an ongoing daily or weekly system, and the pitfalls that unfortunately many of us get into in easy markets. We get into the idea that we'll hire when we need to. That is a recipe for failure, which we'll talk about over and over again, right? You need a system that runs constantly, even if you don't need caregivers, quote unquote. And then finally, we'll talk about some ways of enacting that system. I'll give you a system that worked really well for all of my agencies and all of the businesses that I've worked with. I've done hiring throughout the industry and in every case of every type of business there is, and done very, very well with it. And so we'll talk about some traditional and non-traditional ways of getting caregivers. We'll talk about part of that system, which is doing some group interviews, some hiring days, that kind of thing. And then finally, we'll talk about the mindset that keeping our caregivers is easier and less expensive than hiring new ones. And so everything, it sort of circles back around to making it a premier place to work, right? Reducing turnover is a huge part of really succeeding in this market. So let's get to this. These are the mindset shifts that we want to get to. I'll give you some tips and some feedback on each one. Take notes and as we go, and make sure you type in questions if you have them, and we will get right to them when we're at that place. So again, let's make it a premier place to work. It might be time to rehab the house if we're in a buyer's market where there's lots of opportunity for them, not so much for us. So let's make it a premier place to work. So I got some questions for you. Have you really worked on making this the number one place to work? I've heard from several caregivers of late, and the question is, are you working? And they've all told me, well, all the ones I talked to, and one Denise told me about, and then a couple that I've talked to said, well, yeah, I'm going back to work right now, but not at the place I was. And I said, well, why not? it's just not a great place to work. And I thought, oh, interesting. Okay. So they're going back into the market, but just not to the same place. So that tells us something about it. So here's the question I have for you. Is your place the premier place? Are there some things that you need to do under the hood to make sure that this car is running better, that this home is more saleable, right? So I would look first to training. Are you training your people effectively, right? Is your management staff and your philosophy excellent? I'm talking about the way that you treat caregivers, the way that you run your business, your practice. I'm always amazed. I talk to, businesses large and small throughout this industry, and some are really on their game. I mean, I ask them about statistics, and we're talking mostly lead generation here and reputation management online. And the top ones know their numbers backwards and forwards. They've really managed the process. I find others that don't even have a clue, right? And so there's a definite gap in management staff and philosophy and the way you run your business. And guess what? Caregivers notice that, right? It's not just about, is it easy to work here? It's they want to work for a good place. Think about it. You want to be on board with a winning team, and you recognize a winning team when you see it. Well, they're the same way. They're human beings that want to be part of a winning team. Regardless of whatever complaints they may have had or one time or another, they truly want to be on a team with high standards and a winning team. So are you providing that for them? Work, obviously they need to have work. One of the things that's fascinating to me is that, during a downtime with caregivers, it's very a knee-jerk reaction to cut down on our marketing efforts, thinking, well, I don't have the caregivers. But then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If you cut down on the marketing, now we don't have work. If one of your clients, leaves your either your home or your community or your agency, or God forbid they pass away or something happens, now all of a sudden we have less work available, and we haven't gone and gotten more work for fear of not having enough caregivers. So we're going to talk about this funnel process. There's 2 funnels you have to fill, and you've got to continue to fill them, because if we run out of work, it's the number one reason people lose caregivers, right? If there's not enough clients to serve. And by the way, one of the things that you can do if you don't have enough work at any given point, is do you have other things for caregivers to do? I'll give you some ideas there that you can keep them on board if they're really good. High standards, I've already mentioned this, but the higher you hold the standards, if you start lowering standards, it's easy to look around, and caregivers look at each other and they say, well, if that person can get a job here and they let her do that, right? If they let him get away with that, well, then anybody can get a job here. Do you really want to work in a place where anybody can get a job, right? Or do you want to play on a team where anyone can come and join the team? Let's say it's a sporting team. You don't want to do that. You want to be on the best team. And so that requires standards, and everybody understands that innately. They want to be on a team with high standards. And, sometimes they complain about those high standards being applied to them, but secretly they want the high standards applied to everybody else, and they certainly want to be part of that team. They want to be challenged. So are you holding high standards? Are you letting things go? The more you let things go, you let people be late for shifts, you let people treat, clients a certain way, the more you loosen those standards, the less caregivers want to work for you, actually. Benefits, we'll talk a little bit more about this. Are you offering them? Some places are, some places aren't in the industry. Doesn't mean you have to. There's lots of other things you can do, but that's one extra carrot there. And then finally, the last couple items here, caregiving can be a lonely job, especially if it's a home care agency, if you're a home care or home health and people are out on their own working with clients. It's kind of a lonely job. And so how much mentoring, how much connection with other caregivers? If you're a community of any sort, right? Maybe they have more connection, but even then, sometimes it can be very lonely. Are you providing the opportunity for them to have fun, right? I'm not saying that everything has to be laughs and giggles, but is there a way for them to connect to others? Now, as you go to work on the agency, on the community, on your business itself, the question is, are other people seeing that, right? Are you and others touting your strengths? Because at the end of the day, it's not just about fixing what's under the hood and making it the best place to work, but also are we communicating that? Or do people know that it's the best place to work? So here's where we can help. Again, I told you we don't really have a dog in this fight. We're not an employment agency. We can't send you caregivers necessarily, but we can help in a huge way. And that is that we are the #1 platform for online consumer reviews. Now, there's a lot we can do to make sure that we're communicating our greatness to caregivers and others, it starts with gathering good data. Do you have an employee satisfaction survey system, right? If you're in the home care world, are you using somebody like Home Care Pulse? That's not us, it's a separate company, but are you using people like them to gather satisfaction surveys? Are you doing that on your own, right? Are you getting, if you're a community of any sort, do you have any sort of system for reaching out to current residents from a third party, hopefully, and gaining those satisfaction surveys that can tell you what's working and what's not working? The more data you can provide that way, the better. That then feeds into the PR that you're able to produce. Are you consistently producing articles? Right? We could do a whole webinar just on PR. In fact, we have, and there's a lot of in our library, there's a lot we've done on different aspects of PR, but PR is largely up to you. Are you approaching the local, papers and websites and different places that'll post articles? And are you suggesting articles? Are you submitting articles? Are you doing all of that then uses this data to support what you're doing and how wonderful your community or your agency is? Now, here's where we can help tremendously is consumer reviews. Guess what? Caregivers these days are just like consumers. They will go online and they will check you out. So there's an employment ad that they're looking at, or a friend says you need to go work with XYZ community or XYZ home care. They're going to go and check you out online. We come up number one in most searches. And guess what? They wind up on our site because we're the largest reviews platform, consumer reviews. They want to see what consumers think about you. If you have not spent significant time working to elevate your reviews, not only are you missing out on the consumer side, meaning on the client side, but you're actually also impacting your ability to hire, because they are, whether you know it or not, they're going and seeking out those reviews and looking at them and saying, what do clients think about their service? Now, our program is only consumer reviews. We will only take reviews from actual clients, consumers, and their immediate family that knows the service, the care, right? We'll actually also we'll work with consumers that have investigated you, that have toured your community or have worked with you in other ways. But it has to be consumers. But you can also do employee reviews. Are you making sure that your employee reviews are stellar in other ways, right? There's numerous sites that will review you, and guess what? We're not going to talk much about the traditional advertising, right? A lot of you are running ads on Indeed for caregivers, or you're running on other online sites for caregivers. Guess what? All of those have a review component. Are you monitoring that? Do you know that your reviews are doing well? Are you getting your existing happy caregivers to go on and review for you, right? We're talking Indeed. We're talking all of the other, sites that pull into your local employment sites. Glassdoor also does reviews on jobs and things like that. Are you monitoring all of those reviews? And are you pushing that along by requesting good reviews from your happy caregivers that are part of your staff? That's a huge endeavor that is part of the PR. Because guess what? No matter where you get the caregiver from, again, they are looking you up. They're looking you up on the consumer sites, such as caring.com, and they're looking you up on the employment sites. So make a note. If I haven't looked at my employee reviews lately, right, here I am, I'm trying to put an ad on review. Several of you told me in the last couple of weeks as we were prepping for this, I reached out to many of our folks and they said, oh, I've got my caregiver ads out there and I'm just not getting the response I used to. And some of that is the market, definitely, but it may be, have you checked the reviews, right? They might be not responding because they're checking you out beforehand. Awards, have you put in for them? We have our Caring Stars Award. The season's coming up. We're going to be doing webinars here in the next month or so about winning the Caring Stars Award and putting in and making sure that your reviews are proper in order to be in that running. But are you looking for awards like that? Do you have top employer in whatever area you are? Have you worked with Home Care Pulse on their awards? Have you worked with any of the other award the folks that dole out awards and ways to compete for those? Are you putting in for them and are you competing for them? They go a long ways towards making sure that you are publicizing your ability to serve caregivers well. They will flock to you if you've done all of that work, more so than your competitors that haven't. Are you using your existing happy caregivers to speak for you in many cases, right? Have you done case studies, right, where you ask them for their little bio on how they came to you and how happy they are in a little case study? Are you doing testimonials, written, verbal, video, right? One of the powers of testimonials, which we'll talk about later, by the way, is that the more testimonial they give, either in written or video or audio, the less likely they are to leave you. It's also a great retention program. But it also speaks volumes if potential caregivers can hear from your existing caregivers about how wonderful it is to work for you. And then finally, if you do any hiring events or hiring days or places where caregivers are interacting, are you bringing, and this is another way that you can offer some extra work to your existing caregivers, is are you bringing them in to speak for you at some of these events, right? We haven't done a whole lot of events during COVID, but they're opening back up. Are you bringing in your existing caregivers to be mouthpieces for you? Because that'll go a long ways if you've got happy caregivers talking to other caregivers. Finally, do you have written information on the web or handouts that is showcasing all these things? It has the stats, has links to your articles, has links to all to caring.com for your consumer reviews, to all the employee sites when you've really worked on making sure your reviews there are great. Are you showcasing all your awards? All of these testimonials and things like that. Is there a place that prospective caregivers can access these things? Now, this publicity is all part of a marketing campaign that you say, wow, I've never really thought about marketing for caregivers in the same way, but you have to. We've thought about it in terms of clients, right? We do PR and marketing for clients, but the same thing should apply for caregivers. You've got to be able to go for it. Now, back to the reviews for a moment. It's interesting, 8 in 10 people are trusting online reviews as much as personal recommendations. And that's mostly on the consumer side, right? Those are stats that are brought forward by online marketing firms, in this case, Bright Local specifically. But the same applies, and folks in the employment industry will tell you that it matters. That's why they post reviews, right? All of these places, Indeed, Glassdoor, your local employment sites, any other sites you use, are also gathering reviews. So manage your consumer reviews online through us, manage all the other reviews, through the other sites, but definitely work on it. By the way, if you're not partnered with us, you need to be, if nothing else, for the reviews. Yes, we have a lot of leads that we send for potential clients, but the reviews are almost as important or more important than those client leads that you can get, right? The reviews matter hugely. And in fact, your conversion on those leads is somewhat greatly impacted by the consumer reviews that those same clients go back online and look at. So make sure that this is the new world, folks. If you don't have a significant focus on reviews, both consumer and then employee reviews, it's time to change your mindset about this and change that focus. All right, let's go on to building a hiring system. Again, I know I'm moving quickly. I'm posing a lot of questions, a lot of ideas. That's where our focus is here. We'll answer questions towards the end, but we want to get as much in here as possible. So the next thing, which I've alluded to, is you've got to have a hiring system, one that runs all the time. And this is a mindset shift. Here's the deal. We've all thought about, or hopefully we've all thought about, a marketing system, right? A funnel through which we put marketing. We generate client leads through that. We have all sorts of fish hooks out there in the water trying to pull in client leads. We do all sorts of stuff. We use folks like caring.com, like us. You do a lot of in-person networking in your community. You do all sorts of things. You do PR, you do advertising, you do all sorts of things to try and bring in client leads, which then the funnel, right? You turn those client leads into appointments, whether it's appointments for a showing or a tour, if you've got a brick and mortar community, or for an in-home appointment, if you're an agency of any sort. And then we hope that, there's a couple other steps I left out in the funnel, but we hope that it goes from leads to appointments to contracts, right? And the whole goal is to produce people that are ready, willing, and able to use our services. Well, guess what? There is another system which during the high roller coaster times, during the easy markets, we tend to take for granted. We don't think of it as a system, right? We got so used to just throwing an ad on Indeed and we got lots of applicants and we're done, right? But normally this should be an ongoing system that we literally track and manage, just like a sales system, where we've got lots of fish hooks out in the water pulling in applications. And I'm going to give you lots of different ideas of where you might be able to put those fish hooks in a moment, right? But we've got lots of that out there pulling in applications, which then turn into interviews. And I'll give you some ideas on how to triage that and make it work really well, that pull down to hires. And if you don't have a system that you're running for both sides, you got a problem, because this is a business that is about two sides of a book, right? We've got caregivers on one side that we're offering care, and we've got clients on the other side. And then we've got to meet in the middle. And if you're an agency, it turns into billable hours or billable, if you're home health, obviously you've got things that you're billing for, procedures that you're billing for. If you're non-medical, you're billing hours. Or it's board and care, right? Hours that you're billing on site if you're a community. So those two have to meet in the middle. And if we don't have a perfect match, then you get what we have today, which is a lot of people that are complaining about, well, I can't really expand because I don't have caregivers, yada, yada, right? So these two systems have to run independent of each other, but they obviously tie in. This is the business. So the question I have for you is, have you built a definable system that you're measuring and tracking every single week, just like a client acquisition process, right? And if you don't have one of those, you need to get one of those also. But do you have both systems operating? And we're going to talk mostly here about the application, the caregiver side of the business, but it needs to be a definable system. Now, let me tell you, here's the system that worked really well for me for many years, 20 years. We ran this with all of our franchisees and with lots of businesses. And I've duplicated this with lots of business, including here at caring.com. We've duplicated this. And I've done it for many, many businesses. It works really well. And that is that we start with many recruiting methods, right? And I'll talk about those in just a moment. Multiple pillars, multiple fish hooks out in the water. I'll give you some ideas there. We don't just go with one. It's not just, employment ads, right? It's not just Indeed or whatever site we're using, right? If that's your only method, you're in trouble. So you need multiple fish hooks out in the water that come into a central application process. Now, these days, if you're not using an applicant tracking process, an applicant tracking software, I would get on that right away, right? Make sure you have an applicant tracking software, a database basically that manages those applications. Obviously, applications come in online these days, and that's where they need to be, but you also need to make allowances for people coming from lots of different places. Then out of this database, we've always run weekly invites. Now, you don't have to do it weekly if you want to do it monthly, but it needs to be regularly scheduled, periodic times that you can count on, to where you don't go any length of time without a bunch of these, right? So we used to do weekly. Many of my businesses that I've consulted with still do it, weekly invites to that group. So we keep this database no matter when they apply. They could have applied a year ago, 2 years ago. Again, you know that the caregiver market is a market where people move from employer to employer fairly often. You never know when they're out of a job or when they've taken time off or whatever the case is. So the bottom line is we keep them in the database every single week. We're growing that database of potential caregivers, and we send invites to them every single week, inviting them to our next hiring day. The hiring day is a group interview, and we'll talk about how to run that in just a moment. We hold it the same day every single week, right? We invite people, they have to register to attend. So there's an online registration process that we send them to. As you can imagine, over time, that database of potential caregivers grows significantly. And if they choose to opt out, they can opt out, right? If they say, I don't want to, receive your invites anymore. But most people don't. We just keep inviting them because we never know when they're going to be available. And they'll come to the next hiring day. So every single week. So let's call it Wednesdays, right? Pick a day. Could be, we've done it on Tuesdays, we've done it on Wednesdays, we've done it on Thursdays, okay? But let's say it's Wednesdays. Every Wednesday at a specific location, or sometimes we've branched out and made it multiple locations. If you have a community, it's at the community. If you have a central office, it's there. If you're an agency and you don't really have room at your central office, you can go rent space or borrow space from a number of places, right? From your state employment offices, from your local library, for heaven's sakes, right? From the local civic center or senior center, it's easy to get rooms. Same place every week so that people know, and the word gets out in the community, in the caregiver community, the word gets out that, you know what, they hold a hiring day every week. They're a thriving business. Every week they're hiring. And so here's where you go to apply, and here's where you go to get invited, and here's how you say that I'm going, and you can show up there and you're in the process. Now, that doesn't mean you're on board for a job, because we do the group interview. I'll describe that in a moment. And then we call back for individual interviews. We do the backgrounds and hiring and all that kind of stuff. And then there's training and certification that happens thereafter, okay? So this is the process that we've run. And I'll tell you the beauty of it is, number one, you're building this database, just like a database of prospective clients. You're building a database of prospective caregivers, so prospective employees. And that database grows, and you're constantly engaging with them because you never know when they're going to come up. That's one beauty. Next beauty is that because they're coming into a process where you're doing a group interview, you have the opportunity to get all of the questions and all of the explanations and all of the introduction of your business out of the way that normally takes up a fair amount of time in the first interview. It also turns the tables from them interviewing you to you interviewing them, because you get all those questions that they would interview you with about whether they want this job or not. You get that out of the way in the group interview. And at the end of the group interview, you telling them, here's what makes us stupendous. Here's why you want to work with us. And now we flip the tables. From here on out, you've got to prove to us why you want to work for us, right? And so now you go through this process through the individual interviews, and it's a completely different thing. In fact, it even carries on into their employment, where now they're working for us, not the other way around. I've seen too often we get into this thing of begging and pleading for people to work for us, and then it continues into the employment phase, right? Where they feel like their management will still continue to beg and plead, and they can get away with anything, right? So we want to end that right here, and that's what this system does. So I love the group interview, hiring day, open house, call it what you will. We'll talk more about it in just a moment. Now, this is a very easy system to employ and to get it done every week. We do this every week, no matter how many people respond. And if out of our huge database, we only have 2 people register for our hiring day, we go ahead with 2 people. And if we have 20 people, hallelujah, right? So it really doesn't matter. We've done them as high as 200 people at times, okay, in really good markets where lots of people are responding, and we've done a great job with the top of the funnel. I've had 200 people in hiring days like this in open houses, and we still do it. And it's a beautiful thing. So we run it no matter what. Our system is in place, and we run it every week without fail. We trust that it will produce results. And again, we go through ups and downs in terms of numbers, and we just keep running the system. There's an accumulated effect in the marketplace when you run it, when people know that this is the process that you run. Now, by the way, I mentioned this earlier, but let me mention it here. It's on the slide. The biggest problem that I see a lot of us have, and I throw myself into this category, I've made this mistake a million times, is only hiring when you need to hire. By the time you need to hire, it's too late. We're already losing business, right? It's a mindset that leads to failure, and it puts us on the back foot in terms of on our heels in terms of who we hire and how selective we are and all that kind of stuff, right? So get ahead of it. Now you may say, well, what if I'm already staffed up, right? I got plenty of staff, right? I'm a community. We have a certain number of beds. I've got enough staff for those beds. Guess what? I still run my hiring days. I've always still run the hiring days, and it does 2 things. Number one is I always see who's out there, because I may want to trade up at times if I have any problem employees, or if a problem arises. I have people in the queue, and I'm just very upfront with people about, we're staffed up right now, but openings come open, and you never know, and we want to put you in the queue, put you on a waiting list, because we are the best place to work in town, and here's why. If you're an agency, obviously you can flex a bit. The more caregivers you can get more clients, obviously. And so, it's not as much of an issue, but even when we have our benches full, we've got lots of caregivers that we're not placing yet. I still keep running, because I never know how many people are going to stay on that bench. And I never know how many, if I get one 24/7 client, boom, there's 6 caregivers gone off my bench, right? That are employed, because it takes that many in shift work to handle, a 24/7 case. So you never know what you're going to encounter. And so you want to keep that bench full. You want to keep that waiting list full. So you always hire. And then it puts a really subtle, nice pressure on your existing employees. If they say, well, why are you running another hiring day? I thought we were fully staffed. You simply say, we are. And I'm happy, but we never know when we'll need more caregivers, right? And there's no threat, right? I'm not threatening to fire anybody, but it's a subtle reminder that we are a thriving business. They love that. We're constantly looking for great people. They love that. They want to be on a winning team. And it's a subtle reminder that you're replaceable, right? Without saying it. So I love that part about it, right? It keeps people on their toes, but to know that we have this thriving business, this ongoing system. So build a system. You got to build a system, and you can borrow mine. It's not new. I didn't invent it. I borrowed it from other successful businesses. Now, let me give you a couple tips in this funnel. I'm not going to go through every step in the funnel. You can figure out many of the steps yourself, and you already do them really well. But the top of the funnel, Here's where, again, we've gotten a little lazy. We've gotten into, let's just, throw an ad up on Indeed or some other site. And that's where we've gotten caregivers when it's easy. And so why not? But there's lots of other places. And you know this, I'm not just reminding you of stuff that you know. So what are some other places? Well, first of all, conceptually, we want to build in both systems, both on the client side and on the applicant side. We want to build a building that is built on multiple pillars, each pillar being a marketing channel or a marketing system, right? So in business school, they talk about channels, which is an irrigation metaphor. I'm not much of a farmer, but it's about driving water out through channels to the fields. That's a nice metaphor, but I like the metaphor of pillars in a building better. I understand buildings a little bit better than I do farming. So it's pillars. The more pillars in the building, the stronger the building, the more it'll stand. And so we want to put as many pillars in here as possible. And that's the whole goal, is as many fish hooks in the water. So again, here's some ideas that have worked really well for me for caregivers specifically. You may be already employing these, so maybe it's not so creative for you. You go, oh, I'm already doing that. So hallelujah, you're doing it. But let's take a look and say, have we done it lately? And how do I do it better? So one area that I've been very successful with caregivers is churches. Now, by the way, the big denominations, they have social service organizations. So Catholic Charities, Jewish Family Services, LDS Family Services, Lutheran Services. I mean, the list goes on, right? All the big denominations have social services. And guess what? Most of them, you can go and for free, they'll source people for you. They love the caregiving role because, again, it doesn't require, intense, degrees or skills or things like that are hard for them to find. And so it's really good. Go contact them and look at ways that you can use them. And then just individual churches, pastors, priests, rabbis, you name it. They're all very interested in the welfare of their congregants. And so they're looking for any way. Sometimes they'll connect you up with the women's auxiliary or the seniors auxiliary or whatever they have on site there. Not every church is going to be, a fertile soil for you. But if you go around to all the churches, I used to go do speaking engagements at all their auxiliaries. And the primary thing was I certainly was looking for clients, but my primary pitch there was for caregivers. Phenomenal. These are not people that are generally part of the normal caregiver pool. I've hired hundreds, possibly thousands of caregivers over the years that were not looking for any employment ad because they weren't even thinking about it as an employment, but they're thinking about it more as, I'm somewhat bored. I would like to do something. I'd like to care for people. And here's an opportunity to do that and make a little money. I open this up to a brand new group. Nursing schools or colleges in general. I know that gets us into a younger set, although there's many older people going back to nursing schools. And I know that we have to sort of balance, work-life balance with school and everything else. But I've had some wonderful caregivers from nursing schools, and they love the placement ideas of it. Here's a placement for people going through school that need to pay for school. It's one extra way for them to get work. And so going to nursing schools or colleges in general, college placement in general is fantastic. Senior centers and civic centers, again, during COVID, a little bit more difficult. They haven't been as open, but I've done tons of speaking engagements there. You always want to post your flyers there. You always want to go. Seniors serving seniors is a huge part of hiring good caregivers. Charity and civic groups. You know how many Rotary clubs and Elks clubs and Kiwanis clubs I've spoken to over the years, and how many of them have produced caregivers for me? Again, people that were not looking online for ads. Now, I know that in a couple of states, a couple of you say, well, yeah, I've got licensing and all this kind of stuff. I get that. But in a tight hiring market, you can go recruit people from all these ways and then help them get the certification they need. In most states, that's not an issue. Bring them into the market, right? Even if they're part-time, and that's phenomenal because sometimes we only have part-time work for them, right? State employment offices. If you haven't been back there lately, go. Again, they will source caregivers for you. They'll put you in there, give you all sorts of resources, send you people. Flyers posted everywhere. I've gotten caregivers from flyers posted at laundromats, right? I've even done the little thing with the little tabs you tear off with your number. Seems a little cheesy these days. I'd rather do like a QR code or something like that. But the bottom line is that, go post flyers everywhere, at every civic center, every senior center, laundromat, beauty salon. Boy, sometimes you get, and I know they've been a little tight these days, but you get beauticians talking about you. It's amazing, right? It's amazing how much the word spreads. Speaking engagements, I've already mentioned. I used to speak several times a week in my community, every place I had the opportunity. And most of them were not about clients, although I would tell people what we did, but it was mostly about caregivers, right? I would talk about employment and about what we do and the marvelous work that we do and how we're a cut above and how we hold strong, high standards and how we do all sorts of extra training and all this stuff on the PR side, I would go talk about. Hiring days and hiring fairs, those are opening up more and more. Some of them are online. The more we can get involved in those, the better. Ethnic communities are fantastic. And again, this is, there's nothing racist about this, but certain communities, if you can get involved in, we did a lot in California. We did a lot with both our Hispanic and Filipino Chamber of Commerces and newspapers and radio stations and all sorts of stuff. Did phenomenally well. Shoot, in San Francisco, I did work with the French Chamber of Commerce. There is one in San Francisco, French Chamber of Commerce, in order to source people at one point, and just worked really well. Caregiver referrals, again, your own caregivers, go to them, incent them. And I'm not talking about, hey, I'll give you $5. I'm really make it worth their while. Say, we're looking for caregivers. Bring them in, help them, teach them about why you're the best agency, get their testimonials, and then ask them to bird dog for you in terms of referrals for new caregivers. I know you've all done this, but we had whole families working with us at times. They'd refer their sisters and their mother and everybody else to be caregivers. Don't shy away from the same professional referral sources that send you clients, right? Go ask if the doctor's office, the discharge planner, you name it, is normally referring to you, ask them about caregivers. You'd be shocked at how many referrals you can get that way. And then finally, this last one is a little bit of a dangerous thing. If you're in the home care space, there are a lot of people that try and market themselves independently. And it can be a little dangerous because you don't want them interfering in conflicts of interest there. But they list themselves on places like care.com, which is different from caring.com. But you can go to those independents sometimes and find a ready source of potential caregivers out there. So those are just some ideas. I'm sure there's a lot of others. We could sit and brainstorm for hours on different ways, unique, different ways. But the bottom line is the top of your funnel should be more than just an employment ad, more than just your latest online ad in the same place that you've always placed them. All right, let's talk about the group interviews, and then we're almost done here for Q&A. Group interviews, let me describe it to you, and then you'll be able to run with this. I know many of you already do group interviews, and that's awesome. If you don't, then here's an opportunity to test it and start. So first of all, I already mentioned consistent schedule and location. Second thing is I always have two people there, a presenter and an observer. The observer is almost more important in making decisions about who we call back, okay? Third thing, they must apply, obviously with an application, and they must register for the event itself to attend. So we're not begging people to come, right? We invite them every single week. We invite them, or if you're doing it monthly, you invite them every single month. But they have to register. So, and on that registration, we ask for a little bit more information each time we have them apply and then register. When they come, we greet them warmly. That's part of what both presenter and observer do. And we make sure everybody has name tags. We always start with a game, which is a break the ice game. We used to do a get to know you bingo where they walk around and meet people. And if we only have 2 or 3 people in the room, we had a couple other small games that were really nice for breaking the ice. Then we would have the presenter, and sometimes we would even call in, if it's not the business owner doing the presenter, we'd call in the business owner or the executive director or somebody to come in. But either way, the presenter passionately describes the company, history, why we're in this, the reasons that we got into caregiving and the reasons that we do this. And again, what's all the warm and fuzzy reasons that we're in this. This should be the kind of thing where people get really excited, where they're on the verge of tears possibly because, oh man, this is the kind of atmosphere I want. People get into caregiving partly as a job, but mostly there's lots of other jobs that pay the same. They get into caregiving because at some level they care, right? And at some level they see it as being a mission. So the more you can bring out that mission, then we always ask for introduction. We give them a format of what to talk about, right? State your name, state where you're from, a little bit of your background, history. Again, we keep it to 3 to 5 minutes, but we ask them to introduce themselves. And what we're most interested in here is not how good a public speaker they are, but how well they pay attention to others who are introducing themselves. Caregivers need to be people that are interested in others. And so we look at how well they focus on those speaking. That's why both the presenter and the observer are important. We then give them next steps to continue, right? So we we talk, we discuss the position and the requirements, right? So we go through all of the benefits we offer, all the great things and the requirements, the high standards we hold, why we're cut above. We give them the steps to continue, and then we dismiss them. They can take some of those steps immediately, right? But such as asking for an appointment for an interview. That doesn't mean we grant it at all times, because then based on our observations, we get together afterwards and we call back those that we want to call back. But again, we've gotten out of the way a lot of the information about generally who they are and about our company, and we don't have to explain everything. Now we're calling back with a very short interview, really checking into them and their credentials and what they do. And then obviously we do all of our normal background checks and things like that. So that's what a group interview looks like, sounds like. It saves a lot of time. And the most important thing is, as part of a system, it creates the system where there's a flashpoint where they're coming in. It's almost like your sales presentation on the sales side of things. All right, last point here, then Q&A, is how to keep caregivers. It's easier and cheaper to keep good caregivers than it is to hire new ones. So I've seen many surveys over the years about what caregivers want most. You've seen them as well, I'm sure, and you always notice that pay and money is towards the bottom. Don't get me wrong, they want to get paid. But the more we can work on the rest of this stuff, the more we can retain existing caregivers. First of all, they want work, right? They don't want to sit idle. So if you don't have work, that's a problem for them. If you're an agency and you don't have enough clients, they'll go elsewhere, obviously. But then the next two are respect and recognition. They want to feel like they're respected as a professional. They don't want to be talked down to. They don't want to be treated. And part of that is they want high standards. They may complain about this or that little standard, but trust me, you start lowering the standards, you start allowing people to not adhere to standards, your good caregivers will be the ones that leave first, right? Because they don't want to work on a team that has low standards. That's part of the respect. Recognition, huge. The more you can give them awards, the more you can do all that kind of stuff. They want to be part of a thriving business. Camaraderie is huge. They want to not be alone. We've mentioned that. Education and growth is huge, and advancement within the company. And then finally, they want security. So some of the benefits that you can offer, pay and money is normally at the bottom of that list. Not that they don't want to get paid. And in certain markets, we may have to pay a little bit more. And then finally, the more you can make it fun to work for you, the better off you are. So on the first part of that, you got to go back to these two funnels. Caregivers want work and they want to feel like they're part of a thriving business. So make sure you're keeping both funnels alive. Don't kill your lead generation because you don't have caregivers, right? Enact your funnel for caregivers and make sure that you get both happening, okay? And then finally, here's some other ideas for maintaining caregivers that go right to their needs. Again, I mentioned some of these already. Hold high standards. We implemented all sorts of mentoring programs, teams where caregivers were on teams. We would do events. Not every caregiver could come to every event, but we had lots of events that were free and fun and just a blast for them. Also made sure that they were having fun. We did newsletters all the time, both online and we even sent newsletters, and we would do messages via phone and text and stuff just to make sure that they're connected. Providing education, training, growth, constant education. Again, people might complain, but they love it at the end of the day. It helps them feel like they're worthwhile. Recognize them, lots of awards, lots of spotlights, lots of case studies. I already mentioned this, ask for their testimonials, make sure that they're giving video, audio, written testimonials, reviews, all that kind of stuff. Involve them in the business. Make sure they understand. If your current caregivers don't understand that you're having trouble hiring more caregivers right now, make sure they do. Enlist them in the process, right? Help them, ask for the reviews, ask for the testimonials, get them involved. We're a team, right? Respect them with that sort of team environment, and let's work together to build this and grow this. Look for ways to provide benefits. There's lots of great ways that you can provide benefits at low cost. And then finally, anything you do for fun, parties, events, fun exercises, make a world of difference. All right, that's my spiel. That's as much as I can pack into the hour here. But I'm willing to pack in more through Q&A here, and we're willing to get in as many questions as we can. We're running out of time here. I apologize, but we'll get as many questions as we can, and we'll see what we can get. So, Denise, what do we have in the way of questions? And if you need to put your questions into the QA panel or the chat panel, either one works for us.
That's correct. So one question we had was, do you recommend virtual or in-person for the group interviews you were suggesting?
Oh, fantastic question. I've done both. And especially during COVID, obviously, we went to virtual, in just about every facet. Uh, In-person works better for a variety of reasons, right? I mean, I even observe things like how they dress and how they comport themselves when they come in person. Tougher to tell that on a virtual one, but virtual can and does work. The other thing that I've done is, in lieu of, for instance, in this last year, in lieu of in-person events, I've done videos that they have to watch the video, and there's instructions on the video in the video on how to go to the next step. So now I know they've watched the entire video, right? And it fulfills some of the same requirements, at least the ones where I'm telling them what we do. It doesn't fulfill all the requirements of observation and learning more about them. So I would recommend that you get back to in person. If you don't feel comfortable with that yet, you can try virtual, but there's something about coming down to a central location, dressing a certain way or however they're going to dress, that helps you see, and interacting with people live that I missed during this last year.
That's great. And then there was a question related to those group interviews, and that is, how do you keep your list? How do you build that list to have a continuous source of invites?
So first of all, there's a whole industry of what's called applicant tracking software. I would look into various. You can also keep it in any contact management system that there's lots of free online contact management systems, or you probably have our CRM already that you're using for clients. I don't mix the two. Again, in other words, be careful mixing your two. Otherwise, it's easy to get them confused. But I literally just build a database, either through an online CRM, one of the free ones or inexpensive ones that I can customize for it. But I highly recommend, again, I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm not trying to recommend one over another, so I won't mention any. But there's a whole industry of applicant tracking systems.
Great. And then there's another question related to the group interview. Do you vary the times to capture some folks that have regular work hours that might conflict?
I have tried that. To not great results, by the way. Most of the time I run at the same time every week, knowing that if they are truly interested, there's lots of ways to take a day off work and come, right? So, I varied the time and I've captured a few more people, but not enough to make it worthwhile. And yet you lose out on that consistency where people know that, the word gets out. Trust me, it'll get out there in the ether amongst caregivers that you run a great operation and that you have this process that you go through, and that they just need to apply and then register for the event and show up, and they're always on Tuesdays, that kind of thing. Okay?
And a couple of folks are asking how long those sessions typically should last.
So the main meat of it was about 90 minutes. But again, that varied based on the number of people in the room. Because one of the things, I want them introducing themselves. Now, when we got inundated, when we had 200 people, we don't have them all introduce themselves. But the average, most of the time it's between 5 and 20 people that we wind up. And so if I've got up in the teens, it takes a little longer for everybody to introduce themselves. So it can run 90 minutes. If it's just, 4 or 5 people that come, then the bottom line is that we can do it in an hour. And that works really well. And then we're normally there for another 30 minutes chatting with people and, following up and, saying hi and thank you and asking a few more questions, right? It's just, and many of them will hang around. Okay.
Great. We've got a couple questions. I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse or you have some ideas from your past, but a couple folks are asking about out-of-the-box benefits they could offer beyond traditional insurance like health and dental. What else could they offer?
Yeah. So it's not completely in my wheelhouse. I'm not an insurance guy. I wind up going to the experts. But what we have done, so there's a lot being done now with telemedicine, and there's a lot of inexpensive plans that you can offer that way. There's a lot of plans where you don't have to pay a huge amount, right? There's a lot of, for instance, 401k plans are very popular, and you can set that up where you really don't have to match at all. So there's a lot of different benefit plans that, if you look into, are there. We also, we offered a lot of soft benefits, such as time off for caregiving, meaning we're in the caregiving business, and if they want to take time off to do that, or do the Alzheimer's walk, or any number of other things, we'll reimburse them there. We've done a lot of extra little benefits like that, mostly oriented around time off and different ways that they can participate and and give in the community. And then there's all sorts of shopper discount type of benefits that we've been involved with, where we sign up and then they get discounts on coupons on all sorts of stuff in the community. That's always very popular. And then finally, we run a lot of, ad hoc benefits in the form of contests and awards and benefits that include gas cards and shopping cards and, just things that are extra little perks that they didn't expect, but it's not a uniform thing. They don't expect it, but it's kind of nice to be awarded it because you got a great review and that kind of stuff. Right?
That's great. And then we also had a participant suggest a service called Tap Check, where their caregivers are allowed to tap into their earnings before payday. So that's another benefit suggested. Thank you, attendee, for suggesting that. And another benefit, you mentioned this is time off. Well, at Caring, we can get a day off to volunteer for a nonprofit. So that's another service-oriented benefit at Caring. So another suggestion for you. There was a question about, even though pay was low on the list, if there are any resources where they can see if they're on par or competitive for caregivers, for non-CNA caregivers in terms of pay. Do you have any suggestions for that?
My bottom line suggestion is to mystery shop your competition. So, because all the services, there are some services, obviously, Home Care Pulse runs a survey where, one of the questions does revolve around pay, although it's not always as specific to your area. You can also, there's some different services, some online review sites that try to triangulate it, but they don't do really well, I've found. My best thing was to simply put, and this is an extra job you can give a caregiver who's on your bench, who doesn't have an assignment, if they're well-spoken and they've got any phone experience, is put them on calling around as a caregiver to see what pay rates are. Again, be cautious, because she may find out that everyone's paying higher. So that's an interesting deal. But the bottom line is mystery shopping your competition as a caregiver is a good way to go.
Great. And then how were you successful in getting the applicants to show up for the interviews? Do you have any tips on that?
So I've not had a problem with that because of the group interview process.
Okay.
So I've had franchisees of mine, and I've seen lots of business owners that will run an ad. They'll get, whatever, X number, 100 applications. They spend all day calling those applications, and then they book appointments, and they think, it's kind of like selling them on setting an appointment. I don't want to sell anybody on working for me. I want them to sell me. So that's what the group interview does. So I get the applications. I invite them all to the group interview, right? Unless there's something glaring on the application I don't like, but I invite them all to a group interview, and I keep inviting them, and then they register. And so I may only have 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 people showing up for my group interview this week. But guess what? I had fewer than that were showing up for my interviews after spending an entire day calling, the hundreds of people that applied. I don't call the 100 people that applied. We glance at their resumes. We make sure that there's nothing glaring that we don't want. And then we invite them, period. And it's up to them to then register. If they don't show the initiative, then why would I chase them, right? Now, once they show up, now I'm selling them, but I'm selling them as a group. And there's a subtle competition. I say, look, we've only got a couple spots open, and there's 10 of you in the room. Now, the truth is I might be able to hire more than 2 if they're, if I've got good, good applicants. But the bottom line is there's 10 people in the room, and we've got limited spots. They're looking around thinking, okay, I've got to compete for this spot. And now my show rate is very high, right? Once they've come to a group interview, once they've responded that they do want to continue, now the show up rate is very high because they know the whole game and they know what the hoops are that they have to jump through. So I really don't have a problem with people not showing because of that process. I do get it that doing it the other way, and I don't have a solution for you. That's why I switched to a group interview type of scenario.
And the suggestions you had earlier in your presentation of how do you look online? Are they changing their mind about showing up based on what they're seeing online? So, which brings us to another question we got is, you had mentioned going after awards. And this individual was wondering about, are there any awards that you recommend in our industry?
So if you're on the home care side, you definitely need, check into Home Care Pulse, right? Again, you need to check into their services in general. Both home care and senior living, you need to win the Caring Stars Award, right? So check into that. There's information on our website. You can talk to one of our account executives. If you're not a current client, you can sign up and we'll show you how to build a great listing and how to interact with our reviews team. Denise can help you with that. And we've got webinars coming up on how to win the Caring Stars Award. Now, in every community, every city, county, state, there are employer awards, right? Best employer. Google those and start looking at putting in for those. There are many of the employment sites also offer awards. So look into those. Those would be the primary ones. There are some industry ones as well. But again, each one has its own. Some are tougher to get than others, but I would start with the employer awards in your local area, your city, county, state employment awards, as well as, Caring Stars and the Home Care Pulse if you're in home care.
That's great. Thank you, Peter. And we got my favorite question. Are we going to be offering the recording and the slides? And the answer is yes. Both will be available after the session. And we'll follow up with anyone whose question we weren't able to get to. We're at 6 minutes past, so we should probably wrap up if you don't mind, Peter, unless there was any other.
We're ready.
Okay, great.
Whoops. So quick summary here is that, again, recognize the market has shifted, shift your mindset with it and compete, right? It's just like going from a buyer to a seller's market in real estate. You got to compete no matter what the market. And so we just have a different market for hiring. You got to compete. Part of that is be the place to work, publicize it and get others to say it. Build a hiring system, right? If you're waiting to hire when you need new employees, you're toast. Build a hiring system that can be run consistently. And then finally, it's easier to keep good caregivers than it is to hire new ones. To reach out to us, and if you're not a current client of ours, you need to be, both for the reviews and we can send you more leads. We can keep that funnel on the client side open. The two numbers, the top one is if you're a home care agency of any sort, home care or home health, it's the 590-8989 number to call. If you're a senior living community, call the one below it, the 897 number. And then same thing with the emails there, sales_home care for our home care team or sales. And by the way, if you mix them up, it's okay. We're all one big team and we'll pass it amongst each other. So that's how you get a hold of us. If you're not a client, we invite you to become one. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Denise, for putting this on.
Yes. And thank you, Peter. We're going to prompt our attendees with a quick survey. We hope you'll share your feedback about the session, what you found helpful, any suggestions you have for future sessions. We're also open to any topics you want us to cover in the future in the Digital Marketing Academy. We're here for you. We appreciate you taking time out of your day. And please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.